Most people think the Republican Party's biggest challenge is defeating the Democrats in the next election.
Don't bet against him, Speaker Mike Johnson says, but is he the only one feeling that confident about his party's prospects in November? The war with Iran, general frustration among the MAGA base, and the president's low approval numbers are all weighing the GOP down. One lawmaker who requested anonymity told MS Now, quote, "No one thinks we're keeping the majority except for the speaker." Joining us, MS Now congressional reporter Michael Schnell. There was also some choice words used among some Republicans to each other about why they believe they will lose the majority. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, Katie, I was down in Doral, Florida at the beginning of this week for the House Republican retreat, and the message that we kept hearing from leadership, including Mike Johnson right there in that clip, is that they are confident Republicans are going to retain their majority in the House come the November midterm elections. I then delved into the House GOP conference to actually ask members if they agreed, and the turnout was that folks believe that leadership is being rosy. You heard from that one House Republican right there who said that the only person in the conference who agrees that they're going to win is the Speaker of the House. So there are these doubts within the conference, and it really all comes back to the fact that Republicans don't feel like they have enough to run on. Yes, last year they did pass that sprawling reconciliation bill with tax cuts and a lot of money for the military and other areas as well. It did also include those Medicaid cuts that we spoke so much about. That passed last summer, and since then Republicans have had trouble messaging it, selling it to voters back home, and seeing a bump in the polls that they hoped they would as a result. To dig in more to this sentiment, there was a call on March 1st for House Republicans. It was convened right after the strikes on Iran, and it was supposed to talk about foreign policy, but it quickly devolved into a conversation, an airing of grievances, if you will, about midterm strategy and messaging, with Republicans essentially saying they just don't have enough to tout. One comment that was made came from Brandon Gill. He's a conservative from Texas. He essentially said voters view Congress as a bunch of do-nothing idiots, candidly. So there are these frustrations among members that they don't have enough to talk about on the campaign trail. It all comes as the November midterms are going to be so key for Republicans. They see it as make or break, either continue to provide President Trump with a legislative partner or give the gavel to Democrats who could try to impeach President Trump. Historically speaking, it's always a difficult midterm election in the first cycle of a president's term. So Republicans were already behind the eight ball, but they're saying that with potential headwinds, gas prices, for example, with the war in Iran, and just this general feeling that they don't have enough to talk about, that they could be in for a rude awakening come November.
Michael, great reporting. Thank you so much for bringing it to us. And sit tight. The next hour of Katie Tur reports.
We can live with that.
But not necessarily every Republican is as enthusiastic. Joining us now is the host of Smerconish here on CNN and the Michael Smerconish program on Sirius XM, Michael Smerconish. Michael, as usual, thanks so much for joining us. One of the Republicans who has been more weary about this military intervention is Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri. He told CNN earlier this week he thinks the U.S. has achieved its military objectives in Iran, said he hoped for a swift end to this war, and acknowledged that gas prices are, in his words, too expensive. Is the president potentially risking losing more support from his own party if this war continues?
I think that Jim Jordan made a pretty compelling case, a clearer case, I would say, than the administration made at the outset of the war. As I look at the numbers, here's what I see. I see that largely it's a referendum on the commander-in-chief. Republicans overwhelmingly supportive of the effort, supportive of the president. Democrats in equal numbers in opposition. The tiebreakers are the independents, and that's why by a relatively slim margin, I see the war effort as being underwater. It needs to be sold more about policy than the personality of the president. I think what they need to say is, look, for half a century, religious fanatics who rule another country have sworn our destruction, death to America, death to Israel. We're just not going to let them have a nuclear weapon. And I'd repeat it and repeat it and repeat it.
Despite the rhetoric from the administration, Michael, there is some major pushback on the war in Iran from members of the president's MAGA base who say this is not, quote, America first, end quote. Do you expect any long-term impact of the divide we're seeing in the president's base?
So he did run as a non-interventionalist, against forever war's president. And so there's evidence of some rupture in that base. But largely they're sticking with him. I don't think that long term the MAGA base can be counted on if this doesn't wrap up in the relative near future. So, yeah, I think that's a risk. But at this stage, as I said at the outset, I think Republicans are lockstep with him, Democrats in opposition. The independents are the group that he needs to focus on.
CNN's Aaron Blake writes that recent polling of Americans on the war with Iran paints a, quote, confusing picture and is one that could break either for or against the Trump administration, while also noting that pessimism appears to be the prevailing takeaway. Do you see a world where the president gets a majority of Americans on board with this war?
If they sell it better, I think that possibility exists. I think there's still a question in the minds of many as to whether there was an imminent threat that the United States faced, or was this an opportune moment because the Israelis came to us through Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and said, look, at a certain day and on a certain place, here's where they'll all be gathered. And where for a half century, American presidents have warned and have tried to do something about it at the negotiation table, they weren't able to do so. Donald Trump was presented with an opportunity in one fell swoop where he could decapitate the leadership of Iran, and he decided he would do it.
What are you hearing from your SiriusXM listeners about all of this? Where do you see Americans standing on this?
A mixed bag. I mean, I'm very interested anecdotally on a day-to-day basis to open telephone lines and to hear people from all across the country. And as I say, I think largely their opinions fall where their opinions fall with regard to the president. And the separation of policy and personality is a heck of a lot easier said than done. But I think, Wolf, the stakes require a decision to be made by Americans as to how they feel about this, almost independent of Donald Trump. And instead to say, however we got here, here's where we are now. And we don't want to walk out prematurely because that would cause never-ending, I think, diminished view of the United States as not being willing to see it to the end. So that's a heavy lift to say, whatever you might think of the president, instead think about Iran, the leadership, what they've been saying and doing to us over a period of nearly 50 years. Here's where we are. The task needs to be completed.
Michael Smerconish, as usual, thank you very much for joining us. And to our viewers, this is important. You can watch Smerconish right here on CNN tomorrow morning, Saturday, 9 a.m. Eastern, every Saturday morning here on CNN. And to our viewers, thanks very much for joining us this morning.
So if you want to win the midterms, why don't you stop calling all of us names and accusing us of horrible, ridiculous things? Like, that's absurd. And stop being a bully. You know, we got mad at the Democrats years ago when Hillary Clinton called us deplorables. But look at what the right has become. And it's become this way, Owen, because the leader of our movement bullies people. And we need to be honest about that. Like, why do we want to become what we saw the Democrats called us Nazis. They called Trump Hitler. They called us deplorables. They called us all types of horrible names. They looked down on us. Those of us that refuse to do the lockdowns and refuse to wear a mask and refuse to get the vaccine. They accused us of killing people. People that said the election was stolen. People that walked in open doors in the Capitol. They called us insurrectionists. They put me on trial in Georgia and tried to take my name off the ballot in 2022, accusing me of insurrection. I mean, the amount of things that all of us went to that came on us in hate and judgment from the left is now what we have seen the right turn into. Name calling, accusations, bullying. And this is not, this is how you push us away and make us go, fuck you, excuse my language. Fuck you, I don't want to vote for you. I don't want to support you anymore. I still have my policies and my America First beliefs, but you're not going to have me stand over here and help you when you're treating me this way. And you're certainly not going to pull in the independent vote that you got in 2024. And if you don't follow through on America First and a domestic agenda and MAHA and all of the things that Doge, my God, Doge I thought was great. Well, if we don't come through on those things that were promised in 2024, well, then are you really going to be shocked when you lose the midterms in 2026? Because you better expect it. I mean, this is just.
But according to new reports coming from the inside the GOP, that may not be true. The real problem could be something much closer to home. Behind closed doors, several Republican lawmakers are reportedly worried that their party is losing confidence before the midterm elections. And what's surprising is that these concerns are not coming from political opponents. They are coming from Republicans themselves. House Speaker Mike Johnson has remained optimistic in public. He continues to say Republicans can keep their House majority. But according to multiple reports, not everyone inside the party agrees with him. Some lawmakers reportedly believe the party doesn't have a strong message to take back to voters. And that's where this story becomes much more interesting. Political campaigns are not won only by passing laws. They are also won by convincing voters that those laws improve their lives. And several Republicans now seem worried that they haven't successfully communicated that message. Last year, Congress passed a major package that included tax cuts, military funding, and changes to Medicaid spending. Republican leaders hoped those policies would become strong campaign arguments. Instead, many members now admit they haven't seen the political boost they expected. One Republican congressman reportedly said that many voters see Congress as a group that does nothing. That comment may be more important than it first appeared, because when politicians begin criticizing their own campaign message, it often signals deeper problem inside the party. Another issue making Republicans nervous is the growing debate over America's involvement in Iran. While many Republican leaders support President Trump's foreign policy, not every conservative voters feels the same way. Some members of the MAGA movements have questioned whether military involvement overseas fits with the America First message that had Trump build his political base. Independent voters may become even more important. Political analysts say Republicans and Democrats will likely stay loyal to their own parties. The real battle could be over voters who haven't fully decided which party they trust more. Those voters often care less about party loyalty and more about issues like inflation, gas prices, and the economy. If those concerns continue, Republicans may face a much tougher election than many expected just a few months ago. History also offers an important warning. The president's party has often lost seats during the first midterm election after entering the White House. That doesn't mean history will repeat itself, but it does explain why many Republican lawmakers are taking these warning signs seriously. So this story is not really about one speech or one quote. It's about confidence. When lawmakers begin questioning their own campaign message before voters do, political strategists usually pay close attention. Whether Republicans overcome these challenges or not will depend on more than campaign ads. It will depend on whether they can give voters a clear reason to support them again. Because in politics, elections are rarely decided by the loudest headlines. They are often decided by the quiet conversations happening behind closed doors. We will end of the video. See you in the next video.